Hi everyone, Petrik here. So it's that time of the year again. It's almost Christmas. Tomorrow is Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you all. And just like last year, I'm posting this list on the day before Christmas. So today's video will be about all the best books of 2021. And I just want to let you know first that this doesn't mean that it's only about the best books that's being released within this year. But to be more precise, it's all about the best books that I've read within this year. Personally, I try to always keep up with older and newer release, and because of that, I think it's only fair that I combine both of these categories into one video, because there are a lot of amazing books, new or old. There are a lot of amazing books, and I always try to make sure to highlight every best books that I've read. And just like always, there's a few rules on this list. First, there is no reread, and second, only one book per author. Yeah. Otherwise, this list will be flooded with the same authors all the time. I don't want that to happen. And also, as a reminder, I have written a full spoiler-free review for all the books that I'm going to mention here. That's why this will allow me to actually be brief with my explanation about each book. And if there is anything that interests you and you haven't read them, feel free to check my full spoiler-free review, whether it's written or in video format. I will make sure to attach the link in the description down below. Lastly, before I begin this list, although there is a ranking to this list, I highly recommend every single book that I mentioned in this video. And this year, without including manga and short stories, I've read about 80 novels. Yeah, about 80 novels. So this list will be about the top 20 best books of 2021. And starting at the number 20 spot, it's The Blacktongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This is the first book in the Blacktongue series, or maybe a trilogy. Yeah, this was my first experience with reading Christopher Buehlman's work, and this is also his first epic fantasy book, and I think he did such a great job on it because this was super fun. This made me laugh, and it indeed reminded me a lot of Kings of the Wild, and also the language used in this book really reminded me of the Gentleman Bastard sequence by Scott Lynch. There is a lot of vulgarity and curses, but they all work so well. The humor, whether it's the humor, the charm, and the tension in this book, I think Christopher Buehlman has nailed them all. Kinch Nashanak, the main character, has a superbly distinct narrative, and in addition to that, he also has a blind cat as an animal companion. Like, what more do you need to hear from me? Seriously, it's a super fun book and I highly recommend this. I've read Between Two Fires as well that Christopher Buehlman sent to me, but I think The Blacktongue Thief is more fitting to my taste. At the number 19 spot, I just finished this book about a week ago. It's Warlord by Bernard Cornwell. Yeah, this is the final book in the Last Kingdom series, and I have to say that I am really impressed with the final book, even though I have issues with some books in the series because, in my opinion, the series has ran its course a bit too long. If the series has been re-edited and let's say it ended at 8 books or maybe 10 books long, it would have been such an amazing historical fiction series in my opinion. But even then, even though I had issue mostly with book number 12 in the series, I think this is an incredible conclusion to the entire series. It was so satisfying, and Uhtred, son of Uhtred, he is such a memorable character. I will miss his character. Yeah, even though I had issues with some of the repetitive nature of the narrative in the entire series, I will definitely miss Uhtred's voice. I still think the Warlord Chronicles is a better series than The Last Kingdom, but this one, the conclusion is impressive. At the number 18 spot is Dark Seas and by Richard Nell. This is the first book in Beyond Ash and Sand. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, Ash and Sand series is one of my favorite series of all time, one of my favorite trilogies of all time as well. And this one is the beginning of a spin-off sequel to the trilogy. Yeah, so it takes place before the epilogue in the third book. The third book is Kings of Heaven. So before the epilogue of Kings of Heaven, this is where the story of Dark Seas End takes place. And I loved it. Just like usual, I think Richard Nell is a great grimdark fantasy author, and he proved that again here. Although I don't think it's hugely necessary for you to read Ash and Sand first before reading this one, it will still be hugely beneficial because one of the best characters in the trilogy is within this book. Yeah, that's all I can say without spoilers. Unfortunately, that's all I can say, but if you haven't read anything by Richard Nell, I highly recommend it. He's a great author. At the number 17 spot is Priest of Gallows by Peter McLean. This is the third book, the penultimate installment in the War for the Rose Throne series by, well, Peter McLean. Peter McLean, he has done such a terrific job in creating Thomas Peary, the main character. His narration, seriously, is one of the most distinctive narration I've ever read in fantasy. The book itself is very thrilling. It is the most political, in my opinion, within the series so far, but He has constructed some of the most thought-provoking passages within the entire series so far. And the ending was so explosive that it made me excited to read the next book as soon as possible. Prince of Crowns cannot come soon enough. And just like always, every time I talk about this book, I will always mention this. If you ever want to see me being killed by an author, this is your chance. I've been killed by Peter McLean brutally within this book. And well, it is one of the greatest honors I've ever received as a reader and reviewer. But yeah, this is such a great story, such a great book. Peter McLean is the right author for this kind of story. As Thomas Piddy would say, he's the right person for the right job. And yes, he's indeed the right messenger for the right story. The next book on this list at the number 16 spot is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker-Chan. This is the first book in Radiant Emperor duology. She Who Became the Sun is probably one of the most hyped fantasy book or historical fantasy book of the year. And I think, well, it lived up to expectation, in my opinion. The world building or history is heavily Asian inspired, and I loved it. It was so engaging, and Zhu, the main character, is such a fascinating character to follow. I originally thought that this book would be entirely told from Zhu's perspective, but I was mistaken about this, and the book is better for it, seriously. Once the book became a multi-POV book, it actually became better. See, I always found Zhu's determination to live, to reach greatness, something so inspiring. Shelley Parker-Chan, she has an immensely desirable writing style, and she displayed her proficiency in storytelling in every scene within this book. Such a great book. I really loved it. I cannot wait for the second book to come out as soon as possible. And at the number 15 spot is The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lostetter. This is the first book in the 5 Penalties trilogy, and I love this one. I can't believe that this one is so underrated. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure why this one is so underrated. I thought this one was so amazing, seriously. This book is an urban epic fantasy. It is an urban fantasy that takes place in a fictional world. And although the pitch for this book stated that this is Hannibal Lecter meets Mistborn, I think it's more precise to call it Jack the Ripper meets Mistborn, because the world itself really feels like it's in London, and the serial killer somehow reminded me of Jack the Ripper. Seriously, it is so good. I think Marina Lostetter, before this, she writes, I think, sci-fi books. I think this is again another impressive first epic fantasy book. High fantasy, murder, mystery, and thriller, Marina Lostetter combined them all magnificently. Once we get to reach the perspective of the serial killer in this book, I think it immediately enhanced the entire narrative for me. At the number 14 spot, it is The Spider's War by Daniel Abraham. This is the 5th and final book in the Dagger and the Coin series. So this, without including The Edge of Ash, this means that I've read every single fantasy and sci-fi books by Daniel Abraham, not including his urban fantasy books. But yeah, this is a fantastic conclusion to The Dagger and the Coin. And if you haven't read this series, or if you haven't read any fantasy books by Daniel Abraham, please give them a try. Seriously, Long Price Quartet and Dagger and the Coin, both of them are incredible, and they are so unique and unconventional in the genre. I have talked about this so many times in my monthly wrap-up, but seriously, Daniel Abraham has created one of the most memorable villains that I've read in fantasy. Gather Paliako is utterly insane. He's just insane. There is so much complexity to his character, and he's both terrifying and also innocent, and I think it's worth it. It's actually worth it to actually dive into the series for the sake of reading about this character. Seriously, Gather Paliako is incredibly well written. What a villain, what a villain. And of course, there is so much more to the series besides that, and I will leave you to find out for yourself. But this book, The Spider's War, is such a brilliant conclusion to the entire Dagger and the Coin series. Incredible. I highly recommend it. And at the number 13 spot, it is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is the first book in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. And yeah, this book isn't published yet. It is published 2 months from now. Yeah, it is published 2 months from now. I received the opportunity to actually read this book early, and I absolutely love this. I absolutely love this. This has been pitched as Judge Dredd meet The Witcher, but in my opinion, it's more precise to call it actually Sherlock Holmes meet The Witcher. And what's even more surprising about this book, even though it has been advertised so often as being told from the perspective of Sir Conrad von Wald, because he's the justice within this book and series, but the book itself isn't actually told from his perspective. It is told from the perspective of his clerk and protege, Helena Sedanka, and it really made the book better for it. Seriously, it is an astonishing tale about morality, law, and justice. I highly recommend this one. Super book, and I cannot wait for the second book, but Apparently, the second book will be released within 2023, so I will be waiting even longer for this one. And the next book on this list is The Bone Ship's Wake by R.J. Barker. Absolutely amazing book. Absolutely amazing book. I can't believe that I ended up praising this book so much because for some of you who don't know or don't remember, well, I had issue with The Bone Ship at first. I had issue with The Bone Ship. I think it's a book that focuses so much on world building first, and it is intentional. The author has talked about this, that it is intentional for it to be that way. And yeah, now I can see the payoff. Joran Twinner, the main character of this trilogy, he was practically a no one in the first book, and he was in the role of an observer for the entirety of The Bone Ship. But starting from the sequel Call of the Bone Ships and eventually in this book, his character development is phenomenal. Phenomenal, seriously, amazing. And this book, the conclusion to it, is surprisingly epic, and wow, it was emotional, really emotional. One of the best books of this year, for sure. And R.J. Barker, I will tell you this, R.J. Barker really knows how to land a conclusion. He knows how to do it. Kings of Assassins and now this, both of them are spectacular ending, and I cannot wait to read about his next fantasy books. Apparently, it will be Robin Hood inspired. So yeah, that will be amazing. The next book on this list is The Death of Dulgath by Michael J. Sullivan. So this is the third book in the Rhyria Chronicle series. I am truly grateful. I have talked about this so many times now that I am truly grateful that I embarked upon Rhyria Chronicles within this year. It is one of the best decisions that I made within this year because now I care more about Royce and Hadrian even further. Well, I guess I could say that I already care so much about Hadrian in Rhyria Revelations, but I didn't feel really invested in Royce until maybe the last two books or the last omnibus, The Heir of Novron. It's only until that book that I feel invested in Royce. Rhyria Chronicles really expanded the background of this duo. It tells you in detail how they actually meet, how they embark upon their first mission. And this book, The Death of Dulgath, is the first kind of standalone book. Yeah, this one actually really worked well as a standalone, although I still highly recommend you to actually read all the previous books first. The Death of Dulgath is the best book of the Rhyria Chronicles so far. The hints and Easter eggs about the legends of the First Empire, this series by Michael J. Sullivan, they were so well implemented into this book. I cannot wait to read and continue Legends of the First Empire because of that. But in addition to that, more importantly, I think the new characters in this book are some of the best characters that Michael J. Sullivan has written so far, whether the good characters or the bad ones. I'm actually quite surprised that Michael J. Sullivan is actually capable of creating such a hateable villains. Oh my god, the villain in this book, he's so hateable. He definitely did an excellent job in fleshing out Roy's characters even further, seriously. Now it's hard for me to decide which one I like more between Royce and Hadrian. Seriously, they're one of the best duo in fantasy. Just one of the best duo in fantasy, and you won't get that feeling just from reading the first two omnibus in Rhyria Revelations. I don't think you will get that. And now we're entering the top 10 list, and at the number 10 spot, it is Spirits of Vengeance by Rob J. Hayes. This is the third book in the Mortal Technique series, the third standalone book, and this is, in my opinion, Rob J. Hayes' best book so far. Yeah, it is glorious, it is heroic, and it is inspiring just like Never Die, but because of its pages count, this is the biggest book in the Mortal Technique series so far. I think the book and the series became more epic because of it. And found family, revenge story, everything was done so well in this book. And the anime-inspired battle scenes, wow, they were so engaging and vivid. I loved it so much. Without a doubt, this is by far the most epic book in the Mortal Technique so far, and it makes me so excited for the continuation, which unfortunately won't come out next year. At the number 9 spot, it is Heroes Die by Matthew Woodring Stouffer. So this is the first book in the Acts of Cain series, and I've talked about how bad the cover art is for so many times now, and I have to talk about it again because the cover art is so damn ugly. Yeah, it is damn ugly, and it doesn't reflect the content of the book at all. But this book, it is one of the best books that I've ever read. Seriously, this book was so ahead of its time. It was so engaging. I think Cain is a fantastic character to follow. It is a grimdark science fantasy, and honestly speaking, this is a great example of do not judge a book by its cover. Totally love this book, and Matthew Woodring Stouffer, he can write. He can really write some incredible battle scenes. Super incredible battle scenes, seriously. Then the next book on this list at the number 8 spot, it is Servant of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts. This is the second book in the Rift War Empire trilogy, and honestly, I cannot decide which one I love more between the first book and also this one. Let's just consider them as equal, but I want to give a shout out to this book because this book displays how difficult and challenging it is to actually change a culture, even if it's poisonous and hurtful to the people that actually embrace them. But yeah, I think we all know about this, that culture is not easily changed. And of course, I'm not saying that all cultures and traditions are bad. They are very important. Cultures and traditions are important, but some, they can be hurtful. Yeah, they can be hurtful to the people that actually try to embrace them. That's all I can say about this, but yeah, the world building in this book is fantastic, and the game of council continues once again. Mara of the House of Akoma is one of the best heroines that I've ever read in fantasy. She's one of my favorite characters of all time. The battle of espionage and tactics in this book and the entire series really are some of the most intense that I've read in fantasy. And also, Servant of the Empire helped me keep my sanity when I was hospitalized. Seriously, this book kept my sanity for a week. And I'm truly grateful to Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts for writing this book. Seriously, it was such a bad time in the hospital, and having this book beside me, it was a life savior. And I don't think it's necessary for you to read Rift War Saga first before reading Rift War Empire trilogy, but they will be beneficial. Yeah, they will be beneficial for sure because there are actually crossover between these two series. And at the number 7 spot on this list, it is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. So this is the first book in the Bloodsworn Saga series. Now, you all know that John Gwynne is one of my top favorite authors of all time. And this one just shows again why I love his books so damn much. Seriously, Orca, just within this one book alone, has become one of my favorite characters of all time. The action scenes, just like always, are some of the best in fantasy. Because John Gwynne, in my opinion, are one of the two best authors when it comes to writing close-quarter combat scenes, the other one being Joe Abercrombie. The Shadow of the Gods is a Norse-inspired epic fantasy book, and it contains revenge story, it contains found family, and honestly speaking, the only reason why this doesn't rank higher is because Elvar, one of the main characters in this book, her story took quite a while for me to feel invested in, but no worries because John Gwynne usually, even though his first book, in my opinion, are all excellent and incredible, but he's always the best when he's writing the final book of his series. I mean, Wrath and A Time of Courage, they were both a masterpiece in my opinion, and I'm sure the final book of this trilogy will be as well. Also, check out the cover art to The Hunger of the Gods if you haven't looked at these two. They are so damn epic. They are some of the most epic cover art that I've ever seen. Look at them. First we have a giant dragon, now we have a giant wolf. What's next? I expect it will be a giant bear, giant bat, or giant snake. We'll see. At the number 6 spot on this list is The Hand of the Sun King by J.T. Greathouse. I just absolutely love this book. This is the first book in the Pact and Pattern trilogy. I think one of the main reasons why I love this book so much is because his writing style just clicked with me so well. Seriously, just within the first chapter alone, I already fell in love with this book. I just love Greathouse prose, and yeah, this is a spellbinding debut with terrific characterizations and also immersive world building. Look, and his prose swept me away. I wrote this. Look, this is the quote that I wrote. That's my review. And yeah, I cannot wait for the sequel of this book. This is hands down the best debut of the year for me. Yeah, I just love this one so much. Whether people love this or not, I don't care. I love this one. When Alder's story and narration was so memorable to me, and I really loved the focus on calligraphy in this book. It's so cool how Greathouse implemented calligraphy into the world building and magic of this book, and maybe this entire series. I cannot wait to read the continuation next year. I think the second book is called The Garden of Empire. I cannot wait. Now we're entering the top 5 list, and at the number 5 spot is Reaper by Will Wight. So this is book number 10 in the Cradle series, and I am super impressed by this book. Just so impressed. There was a lot of hype for this book. Well, to be fair, there is always a lot of hype surrounding every book by Will Wight now, especially in Cradle. But this one just exceeded my expectation. The revelations in this book, it immediately improved the reread value of the entire series. Whether you have predicted this or not, they will increase the reread value of the entire series because this has been confirmed. That's all I can say about the revelations in this book. But if you haven't read Cradle yet, I highly recommend this series. I've talked about this series quite a lot on this channel. It is one of the best self-published fantasy series. It is one of the best ongoing series right now. The battle scenes in this book were out of this world epic, and if you love anime, I think you will love this series. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy reading this series. I cannot wait to read Dread God, the continuation to this book. Can Will Wight top this book? Well, we'll see. At the number 4 spot, it is Dreams of the Dying by Nicolas Lietzau. Yeah, this is the first book in Enderal trilogy. The continuation, Cure for Living, will come out next year, hopefully next year. But this one, I have nothing but praise for it. In my opinion, this is a masterpiece of a debut. But one of my favorite things about this book is its focus on depression, melancholia, and mental health. I think just like the Stormlight Archive, we need more fantasy books that actually focus on mental health representation. And I think Nicolas Lietzau, he did an excellent job on this. Seriously, I really felt for the characters in this book. I really felt for their pain, for their struggle. And it is an immensely rewarding book in my opinion. And it is also quite different from a lot of fantasy books. I personally think that the characterizations for Jespal Jalvarek and also a character named The Man were absolutely phenomenal. I cannot praise them highly enough. This is one of the best self-published fantasy book that I've read and one of the best debut that I've read. And at the number 3 spot on this list, we have The Empire's Ruin by Brian Staveley. This is the first book in Ashes of the Unhewn Throne. So this is a continuation to the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne trilogy. And also, I just want to say, I thought it would be impossible for Brian Staveley to actually top what he did in Skullsworn. Skullsworn is one of the best standalone books that I've ever read. Seriously, it was amazing. It was amazing, and I really thought that Brian Staveley wouldn't be able to craft something better than that. And I was proven wrong. In my opinion, The Empire's Ruin is even better. It is an amazing book, absolutely amazing book. Gwynne Sharp is one of the best heroines that I've read in fantasy. I think she's such a fantastic character, and Gwynne was already one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy, but in this one, she just rises even further. Her character arc in this book actually reminded me of reading Kaladin's story in The Way of Kings. I don't say that kind of things lightly because the Stormlight Archive is one of the best series that I've read, and it is an important series for me. And to make me actually compare this book to The Way of Kings, that takes a lot. Yeah, but I can't help it because this book actually contained a lot of scenes that, in my opinion, rivaled scenes from The Way of Kings. Yeah, seriously, so good. The badass and child duo, which is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy, is in this book, and it's utilized magnificently. I do think that it's better for you to actually read the previous books first though, because there are a lot of things that would actually be better if you have read the previous books first. Not only Gwynne is an important character in the original trilogy, as I said, but there is a lot of things. Yeah, there is a lot of things that would actually make more sense and would be enhanced within this book if you have actually read the previous books first. But yeah, this is a scintillating, explosive epic fantasy, and I cannot wait for its continuation. Please, Brian Staveley, have you finished writing it? And now at the runner-up spot on this list, it is The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. So this is the third and final book in the Age of Madness trilogy, and also it is currently the final book in the First Law world, the entire First Law world. So this is the final book for now. And I just want to say that Joe Abercrombie is a genius storyteller, and this is a masterfully crafted conclusion to the Age of Madness trilogy. For several years now, I have talked about The Last Argument of Kings as one of the best grimdark fantasy books of all time, and it still remained that way to me. But I have always said that maybe, just maybe, that Joe Abercrombie won't be able to write something as good as The Last Argument of Kings again, because in my opinion, that book earned him the title of Lord Grimdark. But he did it. He did it in The Wisdom of Crowds. I think in my opinion, this is as good as The Last Argument of Kings, and it's definitely more well written. Chaos, fury, and destruction, this is how The Wisdom of Crowds start, and it remains that way throughout the entire book. And moment of respite, they were also emotional, seriously, and this, as always, contains some of the most hilarious humor I've read in not only just grimdark fantasy, but in fantasy. They are so funny, seriously. I think Abercrombie has a great humor, and he always makes sure to implement that into his books at the right time, at the right moment. If you have read A Little Hatred and you've read The Trouble with Peace, then you know what the chapter Little People signified, and this book begins early with that chapter. Yeah, so you know that chaos, fury, and destruction indeed happen early within this. And right from their respective first chapter, everyone was plunged into this vicious frenzy. Incredible book, seriously. Revolution just doesn't get more intense and explosive than this one. Also, The Wisdom of Crowds has Joe Abercrombie's most meticulous plotting so far, in my opinion. And although none of the new characters ever reached the status of legendary characters such as Logan Ninefingers, Sandan Glokta, and Bias, that's just my opinion though. But really, I think all the new characters, all the new main characters has won my heart. Yeah, they are some of the most well-written characters in fantasy as well. Say one thing for Abercrombie, say that he's unmatched in characterizations in grimdark fantasy. And although I will sound like a broken record when I talk about this, and I did just talk about this again when I talk about the Shadow of the Gods earlier, but really, Joe Abercrombie is one of the two best authors when it comes to writing close-quarter combat scenes. His battle scenes are just so cinematic, vivid, and intense, and well written. They always grab my attention with ease. So yeah, The Wisdom of Crowds has joined the esteemed rank of fantasy masterpieces. This is indeed the conclusion to the Edge of Madness trilogy, but I don't think this will indeed be the final book in the entire First Law World series. I'm pretty sure that after reading the conclusion in this book, I'm pretty sure there will be a continuation one day. But honestly, if not, I am an extremely satisfied reader to have actually read the entire 10 books in the First Law world. And I just want to say thank you so much to Joe Abercrombie for writing the First Law trilogy, the standalone trilogy, Sharp Ends, and also the Edge of Madness trilogy. I will actually give this book a 6 out of 5 stars if I could. And honestly, depending on my mood, I think this could just end up being at my #1 spot. So at the #1 spot, so this is the best book of the year, and this is also the best book being released within this year. If you have followed this channel for the past 2 months, then this will surprise absolutely no one, because I have talked about this book and this series so many times, especially within this month, and this is Jade Legacy by Fonda. Yeah, so this is the third and final book in the Greenbone Saga trilogy, and amazing, this one is a standout masterpiece. It is an all-around masterpiece that established the Greenbone Saga as the best completed fantasy trilogy that I've read so far. I have done a why you should read the Greenbone Saga video, so I'm going to try to keep this brief, but my expectations towards this book were insanely high. They were insanely high, and apparently they were not enough, because this just exceeded everything by far. Fonda has done such an outstanding job in creating this book and this trilogy really, but for this book even more, because this is absolutely phenomenal. Reading Jade Legacy really felt like reading an entire trilogy or 4 novels in one book. Seriously, so many monumental scenes happen within this one novel. Carl Hilo Shudon has become one of my favorite characters of all time, and besides Hilo, all the other characters that Fonda has written here, they stand out among some of the most well-written characters in fantasy. Fonda simply excels at writing characters. She excels at writing characters and also dialogues. One of the things I love most about Jade Legacy and the Greenbone Saga is that actions, characters' decisions, and dialogues, everything have consequences. Everything. There is no exception. Fonda made sure of that, and she made sure that every single character in this book and trilogy felt so real. Seriously, I really felt like I really know about all these characters now. They felt like real people to me. I love the Greenbone Saga so much that I reread both Jade CD, Jade War before I dive into Jade Legacy, and it was so bloody worth it. The ending completely stunned me, and I mean, I even bought a special edition. I don't usually do that. Seriously, I don't usually buy a special edition just like this one. Finishing this book actually stunned me, and I'm still in a book hangover. Yeah, I'm still kinda in a book hangover for finishing this book about 2 months ago. Yeah, Fonda's exceptional achievement in creating Jade Legacy and the entire trilogy really earned her a spot in the pantheon of fantasy greats. Just like The Wisdom of Crowds, The Empire's Ruin, and also Dreams of the Dying, I will actually give this book a 6 out of 5 stars if I could. It is a standout masterpiece. So yeah, that's it from me today. That's the top 20 best books that I've read in 2021, and honestly speaking, it has been an incredible reading year. It has been an incredible reading year, and I look forward to find out whether 2022 will provide me a better reading year than this one. Let me know what you think about this list, and please do let me know what's the best book that you've read within this year. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye.